Okay, so let's start again. I've exposed up here in the neck region for you the trachea. The trachea is unlike anything else in the body because it has cartilaginous rings. If you were to run your finger along this structure right here, you would feel the rings. The trachea has those rings to help hold the pathway open for air. Now, if I were to pull my trachea over to the side just a bit, I can see a collapsed tube underneath it. It's not very clear on the video, but it is this tube that's back here. That's the esophagus. The esophagus is posterior, the trachea is anterior. So trachea carries air, the esophagus carries food. Now, we can see into the thoracic cavity, the structure that's right here in the middle. That would be the heart. You can actually see the atria on top of the heart. On either side of the heart, you can see the lobed lungs. That was the right lung, and this is the left lung. So the heart's in the middle, the lungs are on either side. This glandular tissue that's sitting on top of the heart happens to be the thymus gland. It's part of the immune system. It's fairly large in this rat, which tells us this rat was fairly young. So in the trachea, in the thoracic cavity, we see the thymus, the heart, and the lungs. Separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominal pelvic cavity is a muscular organ, which is called the diaphragm. The diaphragm is going to contract down to increase the thoracic cavity and relax back up to decrease it during breathing. In the abdominal pelvic cavity, the largest structure we see is the liver. The liver has many lobes. Now, if we were looking at a human or a cat, we could pick up the liver and see the gallbladder underneath, but a rat does not have a gallbladder. Looking over here, underneath the liver, we see the J-shaped stomach. Running beside the stomach like a long tongue is the spleen. Going from the stomach out here, we see the first part of the small intestine, which is called the duodenum. The small intestine is going to go and go and go and go. It's very, very long in comparison to some of the other organs. Do you see as I'm extending it out, do you see that clear saran wrap-like tissue? That is serosal membrane, or serosa. And this particular serosa is in the abdominal pelvic cavity, so it's part of the peritoneum, and it has an exact name. It's mesentery. So this membrane of the small intestine that keeps it from tangling, keeps it organized, is the mesentery. The small intestine goes and goes and goes and goes, and you see right here, it looks like I have a second stomach. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. Like I have a second stomach. See, there's the real stomach up there, and this almost reminds me of a second stomach. That reminds me that it's the cecum. The cecum is the first part of the large intestine, and it's very expanded. It's very big in the rat. In a human, it's not nearly that large. Coming out of the cecum, which is the large intestine, is the rest of the large intestine, called the colon. And you can see as it goes out of the rat, there are actually little fecal pellets going out. So that's the large intestine going out. If we go back up here to our stomach, and we pick up on our stomach and pick up on that first part of the duodenum, do you see that red, meaty-looking material? That is the pancreas. The pancreas is glandular. It lies in the arms of the duodenum. It's glandular. Looks like meat. It's going to secrete hormones like insulin and glucagon, the pancreas. I remind you again, running over here by the stomach is the spleen. If I pick up on the spleen and the stomach, in the back abdominal wall, I see one little bean. That's one kidney. On the other side, I see the other kidney. The kidneys are retroperitoneal. That means that peritoneal membrane that lines this cavity runs on top of them. They're behind the peritoneum. So you would have to break that serous membrane, pull it apart to actually expose the kidneys really well. So let's go back down to the abdominal pelvic cavity. Down in the abdominal pelvic cavity, we have this little structure right here that's sticking up right there. That is the urinary bladder, and at this time that urinary bladder is empty. If it were full, it would be like a balloon, but right now it's empty. That's the urinary bladder. Right behind the urinary bladder, you see that Y. Those are the uterine horns, very similar to fallopian tubes in a human female. They lead up to the ovaries. You see the little bean-shaped structure at the top? That would be the ovary right there, bean-shaped structure. And coming from it's just a teeny tiny fallopian tube, and then it goes into an oviduct. Because a rat can have multiple births, she has a bipartite uterus that has extensions called uterine horns. There's that little white thing is the ovary, and a little bit of fallopian tube, and the rest of it is oviduct. So this is definitely a female rat.